Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is protesting their government. Someone is demanding a voice in how they're governed. Someone is holding a sign that says, "We the people." And they probably don't realize they're channeling an idea born 250 years ago in 13 rebellious British colonies. The American Revolution didn't just create a country. It unleashed a blueprint, a template that would be copied, adapted, and fought over from Paris to Port-au-Prince, from Buenos Aires to Bangalore, from Lagos to Lahore. But here's the thing. Most people think the American Revolution ended in 1783, when the Treaty of Paris was signed. That's when the war ended. The revolution? That's still going. Today, we're going on a journey through time, from colonial America to modern democracies, from battlefield to ballot box, from muskets to movements. Because understanding why the American Revolution still matters isn't just about honoring history. It's about understanding the world you're living in right now. Welcome to History with Wits. Let's start with a question most people get wrong. What caused the American Revolution? If you said taxation without representation, you're partially right, but incomplete. Because here's what's fascinating. By most estimates, the average American colonist in 1775 paid far less in taxes than a British citizen living in England, often cited as about 1 shilling per year, compared to roughly 26 shillings for someone in London. So why revolt? The answer is more interesting and more relevant to today than you might think. In 1763, Great Britain defeated France in the 7 Years' War. Victory was expensive. Britain now controlled a massive empire and had debts totaling £130 million, several $1 trillion in today's terms. Parliament's solution was simple: make the colonies pay their share. The Stamp Act of 1765 was the first direct tax. Paper goods, newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards required an expensive government stamp. The colonists' response was equally simple: absolutely not. But the issue wasn't really the money. It was the principle. For 150 years, colonial assemblies had taxed themselves. They had representative governments, town meetings, local control. Then Parliament decided, without asking, to tax them directly, to quarter soldiers in their homes, to restrict where they could trade and manufacture. The colonists weren't rebelling against poverty. They were rebelling against being treated like subjects instead of citizens. Here's something that might surprise you. The first organized colonial response wasn't violent. In October 1765, 9 colonies sent delegates to New York for the Stamp Act Congress. They drafted a petition, 14 careful resolutions, respectful language. Basically, "Dear King George, we respectfully disagree with your recent policy decisions." It didn't work. What did work? Boycotts, street protests, merchants refusing to sell British goods. Within a year, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. Victory, right? Except Parliament simultaneously passed the Declaratory Act, asserting they had full authority to make laws for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. Translation: we're backing down today, but we're still in charge. What followed was a decade of escalation. In the year 1767, the Townshend Acts taxed tea, glass, paper, paint, and lead. In 1770, the Boston Massacre. British soldiers killed 5 colonists. In 1773, The Tea Act triggered the Boston Tea Party. 342 chests of tea dumped into Boston Harbor. In 1774, the Intolerable Acts shut down Boston's port and revoked Massachusetts' charter. Notice the pattern? Each British crackdown triggered colonial resistance. Each colonial resistance triggered a British crackdown. By April 1775, when British troops marched to Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons, someone fired. To this day, historians don't know who fired first. The shot heard round the world remains anonymous. But that uncertainty? That's kind of perfect. Because revolutions don't start with one person or one moment. They're lit by thousands of small sparks, until suddenly the whole thing catches fire. And on April 19, 1775, 13 British colonies ignited. Here's what made the American Revolution different from other colonial rebellions. The ideas. Enlightenment foundations. The American founders didn't invent their philosophy from scratch. They borrowed heavily from European Enlightenment thinkers. John Locke argued governments exist through a social contract, that rulers derive authority from the consent of the governed. If a government violates that contract by becoming tyrannical, the people have not just the right, but the duty to replace it. Sound familiar? It should, because Thomas Jefferson essentially copy-pasted Locke's homework when writing the Declaration of Independence. Locke wrote, "Life, liberty, and property." Jefferson wrote, "Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Property became happiness, but the foundation was identical. The Declaration of Independence is celebrated as one of history's greatest documents, but Jefferson's original draft included something controversial, a passionate condemnation of slavery. He blamed King George III for the slave trade, called it an assemblage of horrors. Congress cut it. Why? Because Southern delegates, many of them slaveholders, threatened to walk out. And the Northern delegates who opposed slavery? They agreed to the compromise because unity against Britain mattered more. This is the Revolution's original sin. A document declaring all men are created equal, written by slaveholders for a nation that would keep roughly 500,000 humans in bondage. The contradiction would nearly destroy the country 85 years later. We'll return to that, but for now, remember this. Revolutionary ideals and revolutionary reality don't always match. Despite its flaws, what the Declaration declared was genuinely revolutionary. Governments don't grant rights. People have rights, inherent, inalienable. Governments are created to protect those rights. And when governments fail, replace them. In 1776, this was heresy. Every major power on earth was a monarchy. Authority flowed from God to kings to subjects. The American Revolution flipped that pyramid upside down. Authority flows from people to government, not the other way around. After winning independence in 1783, Americans faced a new problem. Now what? Their first attempt, the Articles of Confederation, was a disaster. No power to tax, no executive branch, no federal courts. Each state basically an independent country. Imagine the European Union, but in 1785, with horse-drawn mail and everyone's broke from fighting a war. It didn't work. By 1787, delegates gathered in Philadelphia for what became the Constitutional Convention. Their job? Fix the Articles. What they did instead? Scrap everything and start over. The U.S. Constitution introduced concepts that seem obvious now, but were revolutionary then. Written Constitution. Not unwritten tradition, but a specific document spelling out governmental powers and limits. Separation of powers. The first nation to fully institutionalize Montesquieu's theory in a written national constitution. Federalism. Power split between national and state governments. Amendable framework. The Constitution could be changed, but not easily. Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments guaranteeing individual freedoms: speech, press, religion, assembly, trial by jury. This wasn't just new for America. This was new for humanity. A government built on the radical assumption that ordinary people, not kings, not nobles, not religious authorities, could govern themselves. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This democracy? It was extremely limited. Only white men who owned property could vote. That was roughly 6 to 10% of the population. Women? No vote. Enslaved people? No vote. Free black people? Mostly no vote. Native Americans? Definitely no vote. Poor white men? No vote. The American Revolution created history's most democratic government, and it was still less democratic than the average modern nation today. This matters because the Revolution's legacy isn't static. It's a process, an unfinished promise, one that took 144 years to extend voting rights to women. That's still debating how easy or hard voting should be. The Revolution didn't complete democracy. It launched an argument about democracy, an argument we're still having. On July 4, 1776, when the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence, they sent copies to European capitals. Why? Because they needed the world to take them seriously. Imagine being a European monarch receiving news that some farmers in Massachusetts just declared themselves independent and equal. Your first thought? Adorable, send the army. Except, the farmers won. And that changed everything. France didn't support American independence out of idealism. They supported it because they hated Britain. The French had just lost the 7 Years' War. Supporting American rebels was revenge by proxy. Starting in 1778, France poured money, weapons, troops, and, crucially, a navy into the American cause. At the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, the decisive American victory? It happened because French ships blocked British naval support. America won independence partly because France wanted to hurt Britain. Helping America worsened France's already fragile finances. By 1789, France was in financial crisis. King Louis XVI called the Estates General, France's long-dormant parliament, to fix the problem. Instead, inspired in part by American revolutionary ideals, the French middle class and urban workers decided they wanted liberty, equality, and representation too. July 14, 1789. Storming of the Bastille. August 26, 1789. Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Sound familiar? It should. The French Declaration echoed American revolutionary language. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. The Marquis de Lafayette, who'd fought in the American Revolution, sent a copy to George Washington with a note. I am sending you a Declaration of Rights. It is a tribute which a son owes his adoptive father. But the French Revolution took a darker turn. The Reign of Terror, mass executions, political purges, eventually Napoleon's dictatorship. Why did France's revolution descend into chaos while America's didn't? Several reasons. 1. America had 150 years of self-governance experience. France had absolute monarchy. 2. America's war ended decisively. France faced internal civil war plus external invasion. 3. America's economy recovered. France's collapsed. 4. America's revolutionaries retired to farms. France's revolutionaries fed a guillotine. The lesson? Revolutionary ideals don't guarantee revolutionary outcomes. Context matters. Leadership matters. Luck matters. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The island of Saint-Domingue, modern Haiti, was France's richest colony. Sugar, coffee, indigo, all produced by enslaved people. Over 500,000 enslaved Africans worked Haiti's plantations, the largest enslaved population in the Caribbean. When news of the French Revolution reached Haiti in 1789, the free black population and the enslaved population had the same thought. If all men are equal, that includes us, right? In 1791, the largest slave revolt since Spartacus erupted. Led by Toussaint Louverture and others, the Haitian Revolution accomplished what seemed impossible. They defeated slavery, defeated the French colonial army, defeated a British invasion, defeated a Spanish invasion, defeated Napoleon's forces. On January 1, 1804, Haiti became the first Black republic in the world, the second independent nation in the Western Hemisphere, the only slave revolt in history to result in an independent state. And you know what happened? The United States and European powers refused to recognize Haiti for decades. France demanded 150 million francs in reparations for lost property, meaning the enslaved people who'd freed themselves. Haiti paid those reparations for more than a century. It crippled the country's economy. Why? Because Haiti proved what terrified slave-holding societies: enslaved people could win their freedom by force. And if revolutionary principles truly meant what they said, all men are created equal, then slavery was indefensible. Between 1808 and 1826, nearly all of Spain's and Portugal's American colonies gained independence. Simón Bolívar in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia. José de San Martín in Argentina and Chile. Miguel Hidalgo and José María Morelos in Mexico. Each directly cited the American Revolution as inspiration. Bolívar wrote, "The United States appear to be destined by Providence to plague America with torments in the name of freedom." Ouch. Bolívar admired American independence, but criticized American expansion and treatment of indigenous peoples. Still, he used American constitutional models when creating new republics. By 1850, revolutionary waves had swept the world. In 1798, Irish rebellion against British rule. 1810 to 1825, Spanish-American Wars of Independence. 1821, Greek War of Independence. 1830, July Revolution in France, Belgian Revolution. 1848, revolutions across Europe. Nearly all invoked principles from the American or French revolutions: representation, equality before the law, national self-determination. Not all succeeded. Many failed spectacularly, but the idea that people have the right to govern themselves became impossible to suppress. After World War II, the real explosion happened. Between 1945 and 1975, over 100 former colonies gained independence. India, Pakistan, Indonesia, dozens of African and Caribbean nations. And guess what many of their independence declarations referenced? July 4, 1776. Ho Chi Minh, declaring Vietnamese independence in 1945, quoted directly, "All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." He was quoting the American Declaration of Independence while fighting against France and later against the United States itself. The irony was not lost on him. African independence leaders cited American revolutionary principles while noting American hypocrisy. Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya, Nelson Mandela in South Africa. They said, essentially, "You wrote that all men are created equal. We're holding you to that standard." The revolution's ideals escaped American control. They became global property, tools for anyone fighting oppression, including people fighting American oppression. Let's talk about something often overlooked, the economic impact of the American Revolution. Because this wasn't just about politics and ideals, it was about money, trade, and who controlled economic power. Here's a shocking statistic. Between 1774 and 1800, estimates suggest American per capita income fell by roughly 20%. That's almost as steep as the Great Depression, and it lasted a quarter century. The Revolutionary War devastated the economy. Cities burned, farms destroyed, trade disrupted, currency worthless. Continental dollars became so valueless, the phrase, "not worth a continental," entered the language. It's still used today when something's completely worthless. But then, something remarkable happened. By 1800, America's economy began growing at unprecedented rates. Between 1800 and 1840, New England, 2.1% annual growth per capita. Middle Atlantic, 1.45% annual growth. National average, 1.26% annually. Compare that to Britain during the same period, about 0.45% annually. So what changed? 3 revolutionary economic innovations. 1. The end of mercantilism. Under British rule, colonies couldn't manufacture certain goods, trade directly with other nations. They couldn't compete with British industry. Everything flowed through Britain. Independence shattered those restrictions. American manufacturers could now make their own products. American merchants could trade globally. The industrial transformation of the 1800s? It couldn't have happened under colonial rule. 2. The Constitutional Free Trade Zone. Article 1 of the Constitution banned states from creating their own currencies, imposing tariffs on each other, restricting interstate commerce. This created one massive free trade zone. Imagine if California could tax products from Nevada, if Texas had a different currency than Louisiana, if New York required passports from Connecticut. The Constitution prevented that, and it forced American businesses to compete and innovate, making everyone more efficient. 3. Western expansion. The Treaty of Paris gave America territory extending to the Mississippi River. That's roughly 864,000 square miles of land. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled it. Suddenly, America had seemingly unlimited natural resources: timber, coal, iron, copper, and farmland, and a constitutional framework that let people move west, claim land, and start businesses. However, there's no celebrating American economic growth without acknowledging who was displaced. Native American nations. The United States government systematically violated treaties, forced removals, warfare, and disease to clear indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands. The Trail of Tears, hundreds of smaller removals. The economic revolution that built American prosperity was built on stolen land and forced displacement. That's not opinion. That's documented history. And then there's slavery. Northern states gradually abolished slavery after the Revolution. Southern states doubled down. Why? Because cotton became king. The cotton gin, invented in 1793, made cotton processing dramatically faster. Suddenly, cotton was incredibly profitable, but profitable only with enslaved labor. By 1860, there were about 4 million enslaved people in America, 8 times more than in 1776. The American economic boom was built partly on uncompensated labor. That's not a moral judgment, it's accounting. When you don't pay workers, profit margins look fantastic. What the revolution ultimately created was an economic system that 1. Rejected monarchy-controlled trade. 2. Embraced market capitalism. 3. Protected property rights. 4. Allowed social mobility for white men. 5. Created space for innovation. This became the American economic model, later exported globally as the American dream. Work hard, innovate, succeed. The reality was more complex and more exclusionary than the ideal. But the ideal itself became powerful because it suggested anyone could rise, regardless of birth. The U.S. Constitution is the world's oldest written national constitution still in use, ratified in 1788, still governing in 2026. 238 years. But here's what's more interesting. It's been copied. A lot. After 1789, constitutions became the standard way to organize governments. Before the American Revolution, most governments operated on tradition, royal decree, or unwritten custom. After? If you wanted to be taken seriously as a modern nation, you needed a constitution. Between 1789 and 1850, dozens of constitutions were written explicitly modeling the American version. Polish Constitution of 1791, Europe's first, world's second. Multiple French constitutions. Latin American constitutions. Liberian Constitution of 1847, modeled directly on the U.S. Specific features became nearly universal. Separation of powers. Written bills of rights. Federalism. Constitutional amendment processes. Judicial review. Judicial review, the power of courts to strike down unconstitutional laws, was established in the United States in 1803 with Marbury versus Madison. Today, it is common worldwide. Some American constitutional features did not catch on. The Electoral College, the presidential system, the constitutional right to bear arms. Virtually no other democracy uses these in the same way. So, is the U.S. Constitution the best model? Or was it simply the first, with later democracies learning from American successes and mistakes? In 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt chaired the drafting committee. Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. That is the American Declaration of Independence, globalized. The Universal Declaration became the foundation for international human rights law, war crimes tribunals, refugee protections, anti-genocide conventions. Revolutionary principles born in 1776 became international law in 1948, from 13 colonies to nearly every nation on Earth. Nearly every major protest movement since 1776 has invoked revolutionary rhetoric. 19th century, women's suffrage, abolition, labor movements. 20th century, civil rights, anti-colonial struggles, anti-apartheid, solidarity in Poland. 21st century, Arab Spring, Hong Kong, Black Lives Matter, climate strikes, January 6, 2021. Both progressive and conservative movements claim revolutionary heritage because revolutionary principles are flexible. Liberty, equality, self-governance. Each can be, and has been, interpreted in radically different ways. But what would the founders actually think of today's America? They'd be shocked. Shocked women vote. Shocked formerly enslaved people vote. Shocked non-property owners vote. Shocked by the size of the federal government. Shocked by America's global military footprint. And very shocked by the internet. The founders weren't prophets. They were 18th century men with 18th century assumptions. What matters isn't what they'd think, it's what their ideas make possible. And those ideas have proven flexible enough to expand rights, challenge injustice, and reimagine governance across 250 years. So why does the American Revolution still matter today? Because the experiment continues. Democracy is debated in Hong Kong, Iran, Ukraine, the United States. Every time someone demands a voice in how they're governed, that's the revolution echoing forward. Americans still argue about speech, power, rights, representation. These are the same arguments made in 1787. The Constitution didn't settle them. It created a framework for arguing without destroying the system. Most of the time. All men are created equal took generations to expand, and the work isn't finished. John Adams warned that democracy, by which he meant unchecked popular rule, could destroy itself. History suggests he wasn't wrong. Democracies fail, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently. Disinformation, foreign interference, economic inequality, climate change, artificial intelligence. Can 18th century frameworks handle 21st century problems? Maybe, if we treat them the way the founders did, not as sacred relics, but as tools. Your role. Every vote, every protest, every act of participation. That's the revolution, still unfolding. The American Revolution changed how humans think about power. Not perfectly, not completely, but permanently. The questions it raised: who governs, who decides, what makes authority legitimate? Those questions belong to all of us, and they're still being answered. That's why the American Revolution still matters. Not because it was flawless, but because it started a conversation, one we're still having. Remember, history reminds us how we got here. And on this channel, we retell history with wits.